I've always thought that my life hasn't turned out so badly. At 67, I have a roof over my head, some savings, and relative health. A lot of people my age in Pomona can't boast those things. But when it comes to family, it's more complicated. The morning began as usual. I sipped coffee on the tiny veranda of my house, watching my neighbor's cat Peaches hunt butterflies in my petunias. The house was old, battered by life, like myself, cracks in the walls, creaky floorboards. We'd aged together since my husband Howard had died. "Good morning, Edith." My neighbor Verna called out to me as she went out to get the mail. "How's your back today?" "The usual," I said. "Thanks for asking." Verna is one of the few people still interested in my ailments. My son Reed used to be that person, but that was before Olivia came into his life, before I became the problem. I walked through the house, where my gaze fell habitually on the pictures on the mantel. Reed as a kid with the bike Howard and I had gotten him for his 10th birthday. Reed in his senior year of high school. Reed with me and Howard on a fishing trip. And then there's Reed and Olivia at the wedding. My daughter-in-law was beautiful, with a perfect smile and bright blue eyes in which I unfortunately discerned a cold calculation too late. The last picture is of my grandson Noah, the only ray of light left in my life. A 5-year-old boy with freckles, so much like his father as a child. I ran my finger along the glass of the frame. 2 weeks had passed since I'd last seen him. It wasn't that I didn't get a chance to see my grandson more often. After all, Reed and his family lived only 20 minutes away. But Olivia, she did everything she could to keep that from happening. I can still remember the day Reed brought her over to meet her. She was the epitome of politeness and charm, complimenting my blueberry pie, asking about old photos. Howard whispered to me, "Something's not right here." My late husband always had good intuition. I dismissed his suspicions as just paternal jealousy. How wrong I was. After the wedding, the mask fell almost instantly. To Olivia, I was just an obstacle, a nuisance in the way of the perfect family life she'd planned for herself and Reed. I'd seen the way she crinkled her nose when Reed offered to come over to my place, the way she rolled her eyes when I called, how she always found reasons to cancel our appointments. "Noah has a fever." We already promised to visit my parents. "We have other plans this weekend." The cashier at the appliance store, who I'd worked for 30 years, didn't fit into the image of the perfect family she'd built. Her own parents, a successful dentist and former school teacher, were far more suitable grandparents for her son. I went into the kitchen and did the usual chores. I washed the few dishes, wiped down the countertop. My hands automatically performed the familiar motions while my thoughts wandered somewhere far away. The phone rang, breaking the silence of the house. "Mom, hi?" Reed's voice sounded a little strained. I immediately sensed something was wrong. "Hello, son. What's wrong?" "What makes you think something's wrong?" There was a protective note in his voice. "A mother's intuition." I smiled. "You always sound like that when you're uncomfortable asking for something, or when you broke my favorite vase trying to play baseball in the living room." Reed laughed lightly, but the laughter quickly died down. "Next Saturday is Noah's birthday. He's turning 5 years old." I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Yeah, I remember. I already have a present ready for him. In fact, I started preparing for his birthday a month ago. I bought the toy doctor's kit Noah had talked about the last time I saw him. The boy has been fascinated with medicine ever since he went into the hospital with pneumonia last year. I spent almost my entire pension in a month, but it was worth it." "Well," Reed hesitated. "The thing is, Olivia's planning a little party, just family and a couple of Noah's friends from preschool." I felt my heart clench. I already knew where he was going with this. "Olivia thinks you'll be uncomfortable. You know, lots of noise, kids." "Reed," I interrupted him, "your son is turning 5. I'm his grandmother. Of course I want to be there. There was silence. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. I know, Mom. And I told Olivia the same thing. It was unexpected. Reed rarely contradicted his wife. From the moment they'd met, she'd had a strange power over him. My strong, intelligent son had become soft and malleable around her, like clay in the hands of a sculptor. Howard often spoke of it before he died. "She'll break him, Edith. You've got to do something," he would say when the cancer was almost gone and the morphine was clouding his judgment. But what could I do? Reed was a grown man. He'd made his choice, even if those choices broke my heart. "So, am I invited?" I asked cautiously. "Yes," Reed said firmly. "The party starts at 2 o'clock. I insisted that you come." I felt a rush of gratitude for my son, but I felt anxious at the same time. If Reed insisted, then Olivia was against it, and that didn't bode well. "Thank you, son. I'll definitely be there." "But, Mom," there's that uncertainty in his voice again. "Olivia's really nervous about this party. You know how she is. Everything has to be perfect. So, I'll be on my best behavior," I assured him with a touch of bitterness. "I won't tell old family stories, mention your father, or comment on her new interior." Reed sighed. "Mom, you know that's not what I meant." "I know, son. I'm sorry. I just want to see Noah. I miss him." "He misses you too. He asks about you a lot." Those words warmed my heart. Despite Olivia's best efforts, the bond between me and my grandson was alive. "I'll be there," I promised. "And Reed, thank you for insisting." After the call, I sat back in my chair, trying to deal with the storm of emotions. The joy of seeing my grandson was mixed with the anxiety of the inevitable confrontation with Olivia. Our relationship had deteriorated every year, and now we could barely be in the same room together. It started with little things. She criticized my house, too old-fashioned. My clothes, can't you dress more modern? My cooking, we're trying to be healthy, Edith. When Noah was born, things got worse. Olivia thought I was spoiling him too much, not following her parenting system, not holding the baby properly. I remember one day she snatched 2-year-old Noah out of my arms, claiming I might drop him. I, who had raised my own son without a single serious injury, suddenly found myself unable to hold a child. I cried all the way home that day. The problem worsened after Howard died 3 years ago. Lung cancer took him quickly, leaving me alone in a house that was suddenly too big and empty. Reed visited me often in those days, sometimes with Noah. Olivia almost never came, always finding reasons to stay home. And then there was that conversation. Reed came alone, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and started talking about the future, about finances, about how hard it would be for me to keep the house alone. He talked about how he and Olivia could help, but they needed financial stability in return. I signed the papers that day, signing the house over to him. The lawyer, an elderly friend of Howard's, insisted on including a clause for my lifetime residency. "Just in case," he said at the time. I didn't object. After all, Reed was my only son, my flesh and blood. Who else was I supposed to leave the house to? After that, Reed's visits became less frequent. Olivia was even more insistent on limiting my contact with Noah. Something had changed, as if I'd fulfilled my function and was no longer needed. I shook my head, coming back to the present. There was no point in wallowing in bitter memories. What mattered now was that I would see my grandson on his birthday. That's cause for rejoicing. Rising from my chair, I headed for the small room that served as a pantry. There, on the top shelf, was hidden a box with a gift for Noah. I pulled it out and ran my hand over the brightly colored packaging with pictures of superheroes. Noah loved stories about people saving others. Maybe this birthday would be a turning point. Maybe Olivia will finally realize that I'm not a threat to their family, that I'm just an older woman who wants to be a part of her grandchild's life. I put the box back where it belonged and decided to call my old friend Patricia. She worked at the bank, and we hadn't seen each other in weeks. Patricia, it's Edith. You won't believe this. I've been invited to Noah's birthday party. Had the Ice Queen thawed out? Laughed Patricia, who was familiar with the situation. I don't think so, Reed insisted. Well, that's something. Maybe he's finally starting to show some character. I don't know, I sighed. But I'm afraid Olivia's going to do something. You know how she feels about me. Don't think about it, Edith. Just enjoy your time with your grandson. By the way, I can drop you there if you like. I'm going that way on Saturday anyway. I gratefully accepted her offer. Lately, driving was getting harder for me. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be. I spent the evening going through old photo albums. Pictures of Reed as a child always made me smile. What an open and loving child he was. What happened to that boy who used to bring me wildflowers and homemade cards just for no reason at all? Who hugged me so tightly it took my breath away? Sometimes I see glimpses of that child in his eyes, especially when he looks at his son. But then Olivia shows up, and his gaze changes, becoming wary and unsure. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. It's no good diving into the past. I need to look forward to my upcoming birthday, to seeing my grandson, to reconnecting with my family a little. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time, imagining various scenarios for the upcoming celebration. Some were joyful Noah excitedly unwrapping my gift, Olivia finally recognizing me as part of the family. Others, not so pleasant. I knew my sister-in-law well enough to realize she wasn't happy about my presence at this celebration, and she'd probably find a way to make me feel that way. But for Noah's sake, I was willing to endure any trouble. After all, isn't that what grandmothers do? I closed my eyes, determined to focus on positive thoughts. No matter what happened on Saturday, I would be ready. Saturday morning was clear and warm, perfect weather for a children's party. I woke up earlier than usual, excited about my upcoming meeting with my grandson. The first thing I did was check the present. The doctor's kit was in a bright blue box with a silver bow, which I had tied myself, even though my fingers weren't as good as they used to be. There was plenty of time left, so I decided to complete the gift. The local stationery store sold special birthday cards that played a recorded message when opened. The thought of Noah being able to hear my voice whenever he wanted was heartwarming. Pomona came alive with Saturday morning. People were hurrying about their business, some to work, some to shop. A young couple walked a golden retriever in the park across the street from my house. Reed had wanted one once, but Howard had been against it. Too much fur. I regretted it now. Maybe if we'd gotten a dog, Reed's life would have turned out differently. The store greeted me with the cool air of the air conditioners and the melodious tinkling of the bell above the door. Good morning, Mrs. Forster. Lauren, the manager, smiled. She knew me as a regular customer who bought cards for every holiday. What are we looking for today? A musical card for my grandson. It's his birthday. How old is he? 5. Lauren took me to the card stand. This one with superheroes on it should be a boy's favorite. You can record up to 30 seconds of the message. I chose a card and wrote down a short message. My voice sounded tentative and a little shaky, but the sincerity of the sentiment made up for it. Happy birthday, my dear Noah. Grandma loves you very much and will always be there for you. I hope your 5th birthday is magical. Love you to the moon and back. After paying for my purchase, I walked out of the store and headed towards the bus stop. Patricia wasn't supposed to pick me up until after lunch, but I wanted to buy something else for the party. Sweet Dreams Bakery beckoned with the aroma of freshly baked goods. The owner, a ruddy woman named Gloria, was an old acquaintance of mine. Edith, haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Gloria. It's my grandson's birthday today. I'd like to get him something for his tea. Kids love chocolate cupcakes with caramel filling, she said with a wink. What's his name? I can make a special package. Noah, I said proudly. While Gloria wrapped the cupcakes in a box labeled, Happy Birthday, Noah, I looked at the display case. Sweets had always been my weakness. Howard often joked that I was born with sugar instead of salt in my blood. How's your son? Gloria asked, tying the box with ribbon. He's fine. He's working as a long-distance bus driver. I think he's on a trip right now. And your daughter-in-law? I hesitated to answer. She's doing well. Gloria nodded understandingly. Word travels fast in a small town like Pomona. She must have heard about Olivia and I's complicated relationship. Tell the birthday boy congratulations, she smiled, handing me a box of cupcakes. And don't worry, Edith. Children always know who really loves them. I thanked her and walked out of the bakery, clutching the warm box to my chest. There was a small public garden nearby, and I sat down on a bench to collect my thoughts. My attention was caught by a young mother and a little boy. They were feeding the pigeons, laughing as the birds greedily grabbed the breadcrumbs. The boy was about the same age as Noah. When the last crumbs were gone, he turned to his mother with such an open, trusting gaze that my heart snapped. How I missed moments like that with my own grandson. Olivia had methodically pushed me out of his life, and each year it was getting harder and harder to keep us connected. I used to be able to count on short phone conversations, but in the last few months, those had become rare. I remembered signing the deed to Reed's house 3 years ago, shortly after Howard's death. It had been a difficult decision to make because the house held so many memories. Howard and I had lived here for almost 40 years. It's where Reed was born and raised. It was where I'd learned I was going to be a grandmother, and where Howard had spent his last days. Reed insisted it was best for everyone. You won't be able to support him on your own, Mom, he said. You'll be relieved of your worries, and we'll get stability for our family. I didn't know then that stability for Olivia meant getting rid of me. The lawyer, an old friend of Howard's, insisted on including a clause about my lifetime residency rights. I remember Olivia's lips tightening when she heard that stipulation, but she didn't dare object. At the time, I still hoped that our relationship would improve over time, that she would see me not as a rival, but as an ally in Noah's upbringing. The bus took me home, and I spent the rest of the morning getting ready for the party. I showered, styled my graying hair, and put on my best dress, the dark blue small floral print Reed had given me last Christmas. Howard always said blue made my eyes look brighter. The doorbell rang at 1 o'clock sharp. Patricia was punctual as usual. You look great, she said as I got into her old Ford. Thanks for the ride. You're welcome. I'm just passing through anyway. How you feeling? I shrugged. Worried. I'm afraid Olivia won't be happy I'm here. I don't care about Olivia. Patricia snorted, pulling into the driveway. You're going to your grandson's birthday party. You have every right to be. The drive to Reed and Olivia's house took about 20 minutes. On the way, we were silent, each immersed in our own thoughts. Patricia knew the whole story of my relationship with my sister-in-law, and she didn't need any further explanation. When the car stopped in front of a small 2-story house in the suburbs, my heart raced. The windows were decorated with colorful balloons, and a brightly colored Happy Birthday sign hung on the door. Do you want me to wait for you? Patricia asked, looking at me with concern. No need. I'll call a cab when I get home. Are you sure? Positive. Thank you. Patricia nodded reluctantly. Call me tonight and let me know how it went. I got out of the car, clutching my gifts, the box of doctor's kits, a musical card, and cupcakes from Gloria. I took a deep breath and headed for the door. Several cars were parked in the driveway. The festivities seemed to be in full swing. I heard children's laughter and the sound of music coming from the house. That gave me confidence. Walking to the door, I pressed the bell with determination. It took a few seconds before the door opened. Olivia stood on the threshold. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup contrasted with the cold expression on her face when she saw me. Edith? She looked surprised, but I knew it was an act. Hello, Olivia. I came to congratulate Noah. Her gaze slid down to my gift-giving hands. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Reed shouldn't have invited you. I felt the blood rush to my face. Misunderstanding? My grandson is celebrating his birthday. Of course I'm here. Olivia crossed her arms over her chest. Her blue eyes were as cold as the winter sky. We're having a close family celebration. I am family, I said firmly. Noah's voice came from inside the house. Mom, who's there? Olivia didn't answer, continuing to block my way. I looked over her shoulder and saw a group of children playing in the living room. Among them was Noah, my little Noah, wearing a holiday hat and a superhero painted on his cheek. Grandma, he exclaimed when he spotted me and rushed to the door. Grandma's here. Olivia's face contorted with annoyance. She turned to her son. Noah, go back to your guests. Grandma's just leaving. But I want her to stay. The boy frowned. It's not possible. Grandma has other plans. I stepped forward. I don't have other plans, Noah. I came to see you for your birthday. Olivia turned to me sharply, her eyes sparkling. I told her you were leaving. Why? Noah asked, perplexed. Because. Olivia hesitated, searching for a reason. Where's Reed? I asked. I want to talk to him. Reed's not here. He's on a trip, Olivia said. And if he were here, he'd agree with me. I wasn't sure about that, but that wasn't what was important right now. Noah stood beside his mother, his little face a look of confusion and distress. I brought you a present, Noah, I said, holding out the box. Happy birthday, dear. The boy reached for the gift, but Olivia intercepted his hand. Noah, I told you to go back to your guests. Now. Her tone was uncomplaining. Noah gave me a frustrated look and wandered reluctantly back into the living room. My heart ached at the sight of his slumped shoulders. Olivia turned to me. She dropped her ostentatious politeness now that her son couldn't hear us. What do you want, Edith? Money? Attention? Pity? I need to be a part of my grandson's life, I replied, trying to speak calmly. It's normal and natural. Olivia hummed. It's normal and natural to respect boundaries, but you don't understand that. Showing up uninvited, manipulating Reed. Uninvited? Reed called me and invited me to the party. And that was a mistake he'd already told me about. She lied. I felt anger building inside. All these years I'd tried to be polite, accommodating, tolerant. I'd tried to please Olivia, knowing how important her relationship with Reed was. But how many times can I do this? I'm not leaving, I said firmly. I'm not leaving without congratulating my grandson. I wouldn't leave without giving him the gift I'd chosen so lovingly. Olivia's face contorted. Here's the thing, Edith. I've put up with you long enough. I've put up with your calls, your surprise visits, your outdated views on parenting. But I've had enough. Noah is my son, and I decide who is in his life. He's my grandson, too, I objected. I have rights. Rights? Olivia laughed, but her laugh was devoid of mirth. What rights do you have, Edith? You're a nobody, a pensioner who can barely make ends meet. You don't even have a house of your own. You're living in a house that belongs to Reed and me. I shuddered like I'd been hit. The fact that my own son had told her the details of our arrangement hurt more than I'd expected. I have the right of occupancy for life, I reminded her. Yes, yes, the right of occupancy, she mocked. You know what that says? That you're homeless, parasitic on your own son. I'm speechless. Never, not even in our most intense conversations, had Olivia allowed herself such insults. Or maybe she just hadn't said them to my face. Noah appeared in the hallway at that moment. He crept up quietly, and I didn't know how much of our conversation he'd heard. His eyes were full of tears. Mom, why are you talking to Grandma like that? Why won't you let her come to my party? Olivia flinched and turned around. When she saw her son, her face instantly changed. She put on a smile and squatted down in front of him. Noah, honey, Grandma just had other plans today. She just came by to drop off a present. Didn't she, Edith? I opened my mouth to object, but Olivia gave me a look that froze the words on my lips. I didn't want to make a scene in front of Noah, not on his birthday. Grandma, can't you really stay? Noah asked, looking at me with his big brown eyes, so similar to Reed's. I hesitated. What could I say? That his mother was kicking me out? That she called me a homeless parasite? That would ruin his holiday, make him feel guilty and confused. Before I could answer, Olivia lifted Noah into her arms. Of course she can't, but she'll leave you a present, and you can call her tomorrow to thank her. I held out the gifts to Olivia, realizing I'd lost this fight. There's the doctor's kit Noah has been dreaming of, a musical card with my voice on it, and cupcakes from Gloria at Sweet Dreams. She hands the birthday boy congratulations. Olivia took the gifts with her free hand, balancing her son with the other. Thank you, Edith. That's very sweet of you. Her voice sounded sweet, but her eyes remained cold. She was going to end the conversation. Goodbye, Noah, I said, barely holding back tears. Happy birthday, my darling. Grandma loves you very much. I love you too, Grandma, the boy said. Can't you really stay? Grandmother is very busy, Olivia intervened. We should get back to the guests. They're waiting for the birthday boy. She took a step back and started to close the door. The last thing I saw was Noah waving at me over his mother's shoulder, and then the door slammed shut, cutting me off from them, from the celebration, from the opportunity to be a part of my grandson's life. I stood on the porch, stunned by what had happened. It had happened so fast and so horribly that I could barely comprehend the reality of what had happened. Olivia's words rang in my ears. Homeless? Parasite? Nobody. Slowly, with a sense of unreality, I stepped off the porch and wandered away from the house. Only now did I realize that I hadn't called a cab and had a long way to go home. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I didn't try to wipe them away. At that moment, I didn't care who might see me crying. I walked down the street of the suburb where my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson lived, feeling like a total stranger here, like I really was homeless, discarded for being unwanted. Left behind was a home filled with children's laughter and holiday joy. A home I had no entrance to. The house where my grandson was growing up, who would slowly forget me if Olivia got her way. But at that moment, walking away with slumped shoulders and a broken heart, I didn't know that fate was about to take an unexpected turn. I didn't know that Olivia would soon regret her words and actions, and that what was about to happen would change the balance of power in our family forever. The drive home seemed endless. I wandered through the streets of Pomona, barely noticing passers-by and passing cars. The sun was burning my back through the fabric of my blue dress, the one I had so carefully chosen for my grandson's party. Now it seemed like a mockery, dressed up like I was dressing for a parade, only to get slapped in the face. Homeless? Parasite? Olivia's words echoed in my head, stabbing like knives into my heart. It was only at the bus stop that I realized I didn't have my wallet with me. I'd left it at home in a hurry, hoping Patricia would drive me back. a tired old woman standing in the sun with no money, no water, and a broken heart. It's ironic. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe I really am nothing. Mrs., are you all right? A young man with a concerned face touched my shoulder. Only now did I realize I was standing there, leaning against a pole, breathing heavily. No, no, I'm fine, I said with a smile. I'm just a little tired. Are you sure? Should I call an ambulance? Thanks, but there's no need. I just need to get home. The man hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave me like this. Finally, he pulled some bills out of his pocket. Here, for the cab. Please take it. At first, I wanted to refuse. The pride that still lingered inside whispered that I shouldn't accept money from strangers, but fatigue and pain won out. Thank you, I said quietly, accepting the bills. Yeah, I'll pay you back. No need, he smiled. Just get home and get some rest. The cab took me home in 20 minutes. The driver glanced anxiously at my reflection in the rearview mirror, worried that I must not have looked my best. As soon as the car stopped, I hurried out, dropping a crumpled thank you. The house greeted me with silence and coolness. I mechanically drew the curtains, kicked off my shoes, and sank into Howard's old chair. The tears I'd held back in the cab came in floods. I cried from humiliation, from pain, from the realization that my own daughter-in-law considered me a burden and my son didn't love me enough to protect me. The phone rang about an hour later. I didn't answer it. It rang again and again, but I didn't have the energy to talk. Even to Patricia, who was probably worried about how the holiday had gone. What did it matter now? The evening turned to night, and I sat in my chair, in a daze. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking the same thing. How did it get to this point? When had Reed and I become such strangers? When had Olivia gone from polite daughter-in-law to vicious fury? And more importantly, what now? The morning brought clarity. I showered, drank a cup of strong black coffee, and dialed Patricia's number. Edith, at last! I've been worried sick. She sounded genuinely relieved. I'm sorry I didn't answer. What's wrong? You sound strange. I took a deep breath and told her everything. Every detail, every word Olivia said, every look she gave me. With every word, it was like the poison was coming out of the wound. That, Patricia gasped with indignation. I have no words, Edith. How dare she? And where was Reed? On a voyage, according to Olivia. Convenient, Patricia snorted. He must know what his wife had done. I'm not sure it would make a difference, I sighed. You know Reed, he's weak. When it comes to Olivia, he's spineless. She was right about one thing, you know. The house really isn't yours anymore. I know, I grinned bitterly. I only have the right of occupancy. And that's if they fulfill the terms of the contract, Patricia said. That phrase made me wary. What do you mean? Well, when you signed over the house to Reed, there must have been conditions. Besides your right of occupancy, I've been thinking. Indeed, Howard's lawyer had insisted on several clauses. Reed had agreed to maintain the house, pay all taxes and utilities, and not sell or mortgage it without my consent. I mentioned that to Patricia. Exactly, she exclaimed. And you're sure Reed fulfills all these conditions? Why do you ask? Patricia hesitated. Look, I probably shouldn't be saying this. Client confidentiality and all that. Patricia, my voice became hard. If you know something, say it straight out. She sighed. Yesterday, I went to the bank to pay some bills. I happened to see Reed with some man. They were discussing a loan, a pretty big one by the looks of it. What's the big deal? I don't get it. Maybe they want to buy a new car or something. Edith, they were talking about collateral, and I definitely heard your address. I froze with the pipe in my hand. The blood rushed from my face. Reed couldn't have done it. He couldn't have mortgaged the house without my knowledge. It would be a violation of our agreement. You must be mistaken, I whispered. Reed wouldn't. I've been in banking for 35 years, Patricia said. I know what a bail bond conversation sounds like, and I know your address. But how? He can't put a lien on the house without my consent. Legally, no. But Edith, you said yourself he owns the house. If the bank doesn't know about your agreement, I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. If Reed really had mortgaged the house, it changed everything. It was a betrayal not only of our agreement, but of my trust. Patricia, I need your help. Is there anything else you can find out? Without violating your professional obligations, of course. I'll try, she promised. In the meantime, I suggest you talk to a lawyer, the same one who drafted your agreement. Attorney Charles Pearson saw me in his small office in downtown Pomona later that afternoon. Despite his age, he was in his 70s, he retained his clarity of mind and professional acumen. Charles had been friends with Howard since his college years and had always treated me with respect and warmth. Edith, he rose from his desk as I entered. It's good to see you, although the circumstances, I realize, are not the most pleasant. I summarized the situation, the suspicion of a foreclosed house, and Olivia's insults. Charles listened intently, occasionally making notes in his notebook. If Reed really did mortgage the house without your consent, that's a serious breach of the agreement, he said when I finished. Let me see a copy of the deed. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a folder. I watched him flip through the pages with some surprise. Do you still have my papers? Of course, he nodded. I always keep copies of important contracts, especially when it comes to friends. Charles put on his glasses and went deep into his reading. Every now and then he hummed or shook his head. Finally, he looked up. Just as I thought. Paragraph 8 expressly forbids Reed from using the house as collateral without your written consent. If he did, you have the right to terminate the agreement and take back possession of the house. I stared at him stunned. Give the house back? Completely? Exactly. If there is a breach of any of the basic terms, and a mortgage without your consent is definitely a breach, you can go to court and have your property rights restored. It was more than I could have hoped for, not just to retain my right of occupancy, but to regain full rights to the house, my house. But how could I prove that Reed had mortgaged it? I asked. It's not hard. If a loan is secured by real estate, it's in the registry. I can make an inquiry. But first, let's make sure your suspicions are well-founded. Charles picked up the phone and dialed a number. Martha, this is Charles Pearson. I need information on the liens at the address. He looked at me and I nodded. 26 Elm Street. Yeah, Pomona. Can you check it out? I'll wait. While we waited, Charles poured me a glass of water. I took a sip, trying to calm my racing heart. Finally, he picked up the phone again. Yes, Martha, I'm listening. I understand. Yes, thank you for the information. He hung up and turned to me. Edith, I'm afraid your suspicions have been confirmed. The house is mortgaged to the First National Bank of Pomona. The loan for $120,000 was taken out 8 months ago. I felt the nausea rising in my throat. 8 months ago. Reed and Olivia had lived with the secret all this time, maybe even laughed at my naivety. And there's something else, Charles added. It looks like they're in default on their loan. The bank had already started foreclosure proceedings. That was the final blow. Not only had they mortgaged the house without my knowledge, but they weren't paying the loan. If the bank forecloses on the house, I could be out on the street, even though I have the right to live there. What do I do, Charles? I asked in a shaky voice. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. There are 2 ways. The first is to file a lawsuit to invalidate the agreement for breach of material terms and demand that the house be returned to your ownership. The second is to enter into a new agreement with Reed, whereby you take over the loan payments but become part owner of the house. I thought about it. The second option was more lenient, gave Reed a chance to make things right. But after everything that had happened, after what Olivia said, I want the house back, I said firmly. Completely, no new agreements. Charles nodded. I understand your decision, but you have to realize the consequences. It will lead to conflict with Reed and Olivia, possibly a complete breakdown of the relationship. It's already broken. I grinned bitterly. Olivia had made it clear that she considered me a burden. And Reed. Reed had betrayed my trust. Okay. Charles started to write something down in his notebook. I'll prepare the necessary documents. But first, we need to get all the evidence. I'll need to contact the bank, request a copy of the loan agreement, find out the details of the delinquency. How long will that take? A few days, maybe a week. Banks aren't particularly quick to provide such information, even when it comes to protecting their customers' rights. But don't worry, I'll push all the right levers. Walking out of Charles's office, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying had been partially lifted from my shoulders. I now had a plan. I had an understanding of the situation. I had hope, not just to survive, but to win, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe on the corner and ordered a cup of coffee and a sandwich. For the first time in 2 days, I felt hungry. Sitting by the window and watching the passers-by, I pondered the upcoming battle. Reed and Olivia wouldn't give up the house without a fight. They would threaten me, pity me, accuse me of being callous. Was I ready for that? The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Patricia's number popped up on the screen. Hello, I said, putting the receiver to my ear. Edith, I found out something important. Patricia's voice sounded excited. Reed didn't just mortgage the house. He'd taken out a loan for Olivia's business project. Something to do with importing clothes or cosmetics. I didn't understand the details. But the project failed, the money was spent, and they haven't made a payment on the loan in 3 months. So that's where the money went. Olivia's next venture. She always wanted the high life, despised her job as an insurance agent, and dreamed of owning her own business. Thank you, Patricia. That's valuable information. What are you going to do? Fight for my home, I replied simply, and my dignity. That evening, I got another call from Reed. I hesitated before answering. Part of me wanted to tell him everything I'd accumulated, to accuse him of betrayal, of cowardice, of letting Olivia insult me. But the other part of me, the motherly part, the part that was used to protecting and defending, was afraid to have this conversation. Yes, I finally said into the phone. Mom? Reed's voice sounded tense. How are you? Fine, I answered dryly. How are you? Did the flight go okay? There was a pause. I could almost see Reed wrinkling his forehead, trying to make sense of what I was saying. What flight? The one where you missed your son's birthday party. I didn't, he hesitated. Olivia said you called and said you couldn't make it. Something about not feeling well. I grinned bitterly. Of course Olivia had lied to him, just like she'd lied to me. Divide and conquer was her favorite tactic. I'm here for the party, Reed, and your wife wouldn't let me in the house, called me a homeless parasite, took Noah out of my hands and slammed the door in my face. The silence on the other end of the wire was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. I also found out about the loan, I continued, ignoring his babbling, that you mortgaged my house without my consent. That's not true, Reed exclaimed. I mean, yes, we took out a loan, but it was a temporary solution. Olivia wanted to start a business, and we needed startup capital. We were going to pay it all back. But we didn't, and now the bank is in foreclosure. Silence again. Then a quiet, broken voice. How do you know? It doesn't matter, Reed. What matters is that you violated our agreement. You jeopardized the roof over my head for your wife's business project. Mom, please hear me out. It's not that simple. Olivia lost her job. We had money problems, and this business plan seemed like the perfect solution. We consulted with experts. It looked solid. And it failed, I finished for him. And now you're behind on your loan. We'll find the money, he sounded pleading. I'll pick up extra shifts. Olivia's looking for a new job. It's too late, Reed. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm going to repossess the house. There was a long pause. When Reed spoke again, his voice was barely audible. You? Are you going to kick us out? That question struck at the heart of the matter. Despite everything that had happened, Reed was still my son. I couldn't imagine leaving him homeless, especially with Noah living with them. No, I sighed. But the terms would be different. The house will be mine, and mine alone. If you want to live in it, it will be on my terms. What terms? There was hope in his voice. I haven't decided yet, but rest assured your wife will never dare to call me homeless again. With those words, I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding like crazy. I had never spoken so harshly to my son in my life. Even as a teenager, when he was experimenting with alcohol and skipping school, I had always tried to be understanding, patient, but now everything was different. Olivia's insults, Reed's betrayal, the threat of losing the roof over my head, all of it demanded decisive action. No more compromises, no more concessions. It was time to stand up for myself. I remembered the words Howard had often said in the last months of his life. Be strong, Edith. The world is not always kind to those who are weak. I had nodded then, not quite knowing what he was talking about. Now I knew. The phone rang again, probably Reed, wanting to continue the conversation, to explain himself, to beg forgiveness. But I didn't answer it. The time for talking was over. Now it was time for action. Charles called 3 days later. Edith, I have good news. I've received all the necessary documents from the bank. The evidence of the breach of contract is irrefutable. We can sue. How soon can we get the house back? If everything goes smoothly, a month, month and a half, but be prepared for Reed to hire his own lawyer and contest the suit. On what grounds? I wondered. He could argue that he had verbal consent from you to use the house as collateral, or that you knew about the loan and didn't object. I wondered. Sure, Reed could lie. But would it work? Would the court believe his word against mine? More likely no than yes, Charles answered, especially since we have a written agreement forbidding bail without your consent. But either way, we have to be ready to fight. I'm ready, I said firmly. Hanging up the phone, I walked to the window. The evening sun was painting the roofs of the houses a golden color. Somewhere in the distance, children were playing, their laughter ringing through the closed window. I thought of Noah. How would the coming battle affect him? Wouldn't he become the unwitting victim of a war between adults? But then I remembered Olivia's face when she'd called me homeless, her scornful look, her certainty that I could never fight back. And my resolve grew stronger. Some battles are worth fighting, not just for yourself, but for those you love, for them to see that dignity and justice are not empty words, so that they know that even an old woman can stand up for herself if she's right. Noah must grow up with the understanding that actions have consequences, that you can't hurt others with impunity, especially those weaker than you. And if that's the lesson he's going to learn from watching his mother's ambitions collapse, then so be it. I went back to the table and opened the old photo album. Pictures of Howard, of Reed, of the three of us, happy and carefree. Then pictures of little Noah in his grandfather's arms. some of the last ones before cancer finally broke Howard. What would our world be like if he were alive? Would Olivia have been able to manipulate Reed like that under the watchful eye of his father? Would Howard have allowed our house to be mortgaged for a questionable venture? Unanswered questions. But one thing I did know was that Howard would approve of my actions. He'd always taught me and Reed to stand up for justice, not to let others violate our dignity. And now I was acting in accordance with his lessons. The phone rang again. This time I picked it up, expecting to hear Reed's voice or Charles's. But it was Patricia. Edith, I have more news, and it's not good. Olivia didn't just lose her job, she's been fired for fraud. Something to do with insurance fraud. The company hasn't sued her yet, but they're threatening to do so. I shook my head. The situation was getting more and more confusing. Reed and Olivia weren't just in a financial crisis, they were on the verge of total collapse. An unpaid loan, the threat of losing their home, job loss, possible criminal prosecution. Thanks for letting me know, I said. What are you going to do? Patricia asked. I wondered. Part of me rejoiced at the thought of Olivia getting what she deserved, that she would be humiliated and crushed like she'd tried to humiliate and crush me. But the other part, the part that still loved her son and grandson, was worried about the consequences. What I have to do, I finally answered. I'll get my home and my dignity back. And what happens next, we'll see. The next 2 weeks passed in tense anticipation. Charles worked on the paperwork for the lawsuit, and I tried to get used to the idea that I might soon be the full owner of my house again. Reed called several times, but I didn't answer. I needed time to calm down, to collect my thoughts, so that the anger and resentment wouldn't drown out the voice of reason. Wednesday morning, as I was returning from the store with a small bag of groceries, I saw a familiar figure on my porch. Reed was sitting on the steps with his arms wrapped around his head. Even from the back, I could see that his shoulders were slumped and his posture was one of hopelessness. I slowed my step, weighing my options. I could turn around and walk away, wait somewhere until he was gone. But something about his posture, so broken, so desperate, had tugged at the maternal strings in my heart. Reed, I called softly, moving closer. He flinched and raised his head. His face was gaunt, his eyes red, as if from sleep or tears. Mom, his voice was hoarse. I'm sorry I came unannounced. I called, but you didn't answer. I silently walked up to the porch and opened the door. Come on in. Reed tentatively followed me into the house. I went into the kitchen, put the bag on the table, and started putting away the groceries without looking at my son. Would you like some coffee? I finally asked. Yeah, if that's okay. I turned on the old coffee pot and pulled 2 cups out of the cupboard, my favorite lavender cup, and the one Reed always drank out of as a kid, the one with the astronaut drawn on it. A ridiculous cup for a grown man, but I didn't have any others. What's wrong? I asked, turning to him. You look terrible. Reed ran his hand over his face. I've been fired. I froze with a milk carton in my hand. What? Downsizing. Companies closing some routes, laying off drivers. I got hit. I slowly put the milk on the table. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Whatever our differences, losing a job is a hard blow to anyone. That's not all. Reed lowered his gaze. Olivia was having problems at work. Serious problems. I heard, I nodded. Something to do with fraud? Reed looked up in surprise. How do you know? Pomona is a small town. Word travels fast. He sighed. It's not just a rumor. She's being accused of forging insurance policies. Olivia says she's innocent, that she was framed, but the evidence, he shook his head, the evidence looks convincing. The coffee pot puffed, signaling the brew was ready. I poured the coffee into cups, added milk, just a little for myself, and a decent amount for Reed, like he always liked. What now? I asked, sitting down across from him. Reed put both hands around the cup, as if trying to warm himself with its warmth. We're on the verge of collapse, Mom. The loan's been in default for 4 months. The bank sent one last warning before eviction. I don't have a job. Olivia's about to get fired, if not worse. The insurance company's threatening to sue. What about the money from the loan? Couldn't you have put some of it away for a rainy day? Reed grinned bitterly. It's all invested in Olivia's business, importing designer clothes from Europe. It seemed like a promising idea, but it went wrong. The first shipment got stuck in customs, the second was defective, and we couldn't order the third. We ran out of money. I shook my head. The story was painfully familiar. Olivia had always aspired to luxury, to status. Being an insurance agent had seemed too down to earth, too unworthy of her ambition, and the result was an adventure that swallowed up all the money and pushed her family to the brink of homelessness. And you came to me for help, I said without a questioning tone. Reed looked up at me with eyes full of despair. Mom, I know I have no right to ask, especially after everything that's happened. After the way Olivia treated you at Noah's birthday party, after the story about the loan. He paused, searching for words. But I have nowhere else to go. For Noah's sake, if not for mine. I sipped my coffee, giving myself time to think. Part of me wanted to agree immediately, to help my son in his time of need. But the other part, the part that still remembered Olivia's scornful words, her haughty gaze resisted. What exactly do you want from me? Reed took a deep breath. We could lose the house. We have nowhere to go. Yeah, I'm asking you not to file a repossession suit. Give us time to get back on our feet. What about the loan payments? The bank won't wait. I'll get a job, Reed said hastily. I've already sent out resumes. There are a couple of promising options. I looked at my son carefully. He'd always been a bad liar. Even now, at 36, he couldn't hide the uncertainty in his every word. Reed, I said softly, you know that even if you got a job tomorrow, you wouldn't get a paycheck for another month, and the bank wants the money now. He lowered his head. I know, that's why, he stammered, clearly hesitant to continue. That's why you want me to take over the payments, I finished for him. Reed nodded without looking up. Temporarily, just until we get back on our feet. I'll pay back every dime, I swear. I pushed the cup away and folded my hands on the table. Reed, look at me. He looked up reluctantly. You're asking me to pay off a loan you took out without my knowledge, violating our agreement. A loan the money from which went to your wife's business venture. The same wife who called me a homeless parasite and slammed the door in my face when I came to wish my grandson a happy birthday. Reed flinched at each word as if from a blow. I know what it looks like, he whispered, and I'm not making excuses for myself or Olivia. But Noah isn't to blame for our mistakes. He shouldn't have to suffer. It was a strong argument, and Reed knew it. I adored my grandson, and the thought of him being homeless was unbearable. What did Olivia think about all this? I asked. Does she know you came to see me? Reed wrinkled his nose. No, she wouldn't approve. She's very proud. Proud, I repeated bitterly. Proud enough to lose her home and not accept help from a mother-in-law she despised. Mom, please, I'll talk to her. I'll explain the situation. She'll understand. I looked at him skeptically. In all the years I'd known Olivia, I'd never once seen her admit her mistakes or make concessions. She was always right, always knew better, always thought her opinion was the only right one. What exactly do you want from me, Reed? I said it again. Specifically. He gathered his wits. I want you to drop the foreclosure suit and help us with the loan payments until we get back on our feet. I've been thinking, What Reed was asking for meant giving up on my plans, on getting justice. It meant continuing to live in limbo, with the right to live, but without full control of my own home. And what do I get in return? I asked bluntly. Reed looked puzzled. What do you mean? I mean that any deal has to be mutually beneficial. If I drop the lawsuit and take over the loan payments, what do I get in return? Mom, we're talking about saving your family, your grandson. No, Reed, I said firmly. This is about me paying for your mistakes, and I want to know what I'm getting in return. He fell silent, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. In all my years, I've never imposed conditions, never demanded anything in return for my help and support. But that was different now. Now I knew the price of my kindness, contempt, and ingratitude. What do you want? Reed finally asked. First, full ownership of the house reverts back to me, I began. No temporary arrangements. The house becomes mine, just as it was before I signed it over to you. Reed nodded. Fair enough. Second, I want to see Noah on a regular basis. Not when Olivia allows it, but when I want to. No obstacles, no excuses. Reed nodded again, though less confidently. And third, I looked him straight in the eye. I want respect, from you and from Olivia. No insults, no trying to push me out of the family. I'm your mother and Noah's grandmother, and I demand to be treated accordingly. Reed was silent for a moment, considering my words. Then he nodded slowly. I agree to all the terms, and I promise that Olivia will agree to them too. Don't promise something you're not sure of, I said. I want to hear it from her in person. Okay, Reed nodded. We'll come together and you'll hear it from her. I nodded, accepting his words. Then I stood up and started clearing the cups off the table. What about Noah? Reed asked. He misses you. He asks why you don't come around anymore. My heart ached. I missed my grandson so much. His laughter, his spontaneity, the way he told me about his little discoveries and adventures. I miss him too, I admitted. But after what happened at the birthday party, I'm not sure I'm ready to go through that kind of humiliation again. It won't happen again, Reed said hastily. I promise, we can meet on neutral ground if you want, a park or a coffee shop. I thought about it. The offer was tempting. To see Noah, to hold him, to hear his voice. Okay, I nodded. This weekend in Greenfield Park, noon. Great. Reed smiled with obvious relief. I'll bring him. He rose, clearly ready to leave. At the threshold of the kitchen, he turned around. Thanks, Mom, for everything. I know I don't deserve your help after everything that's happened. You're my son, Reed, I said simply, no matter what. When the front door closed behind him, I sank into a chair, feeling a sudden weakness in my knees. The conversation had exhausted me more than I'd expected. So many emotions, so many difficult decisions. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Patricia. What's up, friend? She asked cheerfully. Any news? Reed came by, I answered. He got fired, and Olivia's having some serious problems at work. Wow, Patricia whistled. What did he want? Help. They were on the verge of being evicted from the house. And you, of course, agreed to help? Patricia sounded disapproving. Not just like that, I countered. I put conditions on it. I get to own the house. I get to see Noah whenever I want, and no insults from Olivia. And you believe she'll agree to that? Not really, I admitted. But they don't have a choice. Without my help, they're going to end up on the street. You're too kind to them, Patricia sighed. After everything they've done. It's not about them, I said quietly. It's about Noah. I can't let my grandson end up homeless. Patricia paused for a moment, then softened. I understand. Just be careful, Edith. People who are cornered can do a lot of things, especially people like Olivia. I know, I said. Believe me, I'll be on the lookout. After the call, I went back to my daily routine of laundry, cleaning, cooking. But my thoughts kept returning to my upcoming meeting with Olivia. What would she be like? Would she agree to my terms? Or would pride override common sense again? That evening, the doorbell rang. Charles Pearson, my lawyer, stood on the doorstep. I blinked in surprise. He'd never come unannounced before. Charles, is something wrong? May I come in? He asked instead of answering. I stepped aside, letting him into the house. We went into the living room, where Charles sank heavily into an armchair. I'm sorry for the sudden visit, Edith, but there's some news I wanted to tell you in person. Good or bad? I asked, sitting down opposite. That depends on who it's for, he answered cryptically. I got the information from a reliable police source. Olivia has been charged with fraud. The insurance company has filed a report. I shuddered. Reed had mentioned Olivia's problems at work, but I hadn't thought it would get to the police so quickly. What does that mean? It means that if the allegations stick, she could face a trial, maybe even jail time. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. The situation was getting messier and messier. How does this affect our lawsuit about the house? Not directly, Charles answered, but indirectly. If Olivia is found guilty, her financial situation will be even worse. She might have to pay the insurance company. In that case, the chances that she and Reed would be able to pay off the loan were practically nil. I told Charles about Reed's visit and our arrangement. So you're willing to drop the lawsuit if they agree to your terms? He clarified. Yes, I nodded. I'd get the house back. I'd help pay off the loan. And in exchange, I'd get respect and the chance to see my grandson. Charles tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the arm of his chair. That could work, but we need to draw up a new agreement, a legally sound one, so they don't have any loopholes this time. Of course, I agreed. I won't make the same mistakes I made before. Charles promised to have the documents ready in the next few days. When he left, I sat in silence for a long time, pondering the news. The charges against Olivia, Reed losing his job, the threat of eviction. Their lives were falling apart before my eyes. And no matter how hurt I was, no matter how much I longed for justice, I couldn't rejoice in their misfortune, especially knowing that little Noah was caught up in this maelstrom of problems. An innocent child who didn't understand what was going on and didn't deserve to suffer because of adult mistakes. The phone rang again. This time it was Reed. Mom? His voice sounded strange, strained. Olivia's been called to the police to testify. I know, I said quietly. Charles told me. Who's Charles? My lawyer. There was silence. So you're suing after all, Reed finally said bitterly. Despite our agreement. No, Reed, I haven't changed my mind, but I need a lawyer to draw up a new agreement, to make it legal. Ah, he breathed out in relief. I'm sorry, I'm just freaking out. Olivia's hysterical. She swears she's innocent, that she was framed. Do you believe that? I asked her bluntly. Reed hesitated. Yeah, want to believe it. She's my wife. She's the mother of my son. But, I nudged him. But the evidence looks convincing, he admitted quietly. The police found files on her computer with forged policies, and the money from those policies was going into an account she'd opened under a different name. I shook my head. The situation was getting murkier and murkier. What's going to happen next? I don't know. Reed's voice trembled. If she gets arrested, I don't know what to do about Noah. I don't know how to explain to him that Mom. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his mother's been arrested for fraud? It's going to be okay, I said, even though I couldn't believe what I was saying. We'll be okay. Together. Thank you, Mom. Reed whispered. For everything. I don't know what we'd do without you. After we talked, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My thoughts revolved around my upcoming meeting with Olivia. Now that she was facing criminal charges, would she be more cooperative? Or would her desperation make her even more aggressive and unpredictable? One thing I knew for sure, no matter how I felt about my daughter-in-law, I couldn't leave my son and grandson in the lurch. Even if it meant helping a woman who despised me and did everything she could to push me out of their lives. Sometimes being a mother and grandmother means putting your family's interests ahead of your own hurts and desires, even if that family has hurt you, even if justice demands otherwise. I went to sleep with a firm resolve. No matter what happens, I will fight for Noah's well-being, even if it means dealing with Olivia, even if I have to forgive the unforgivable. Because in the end, my love for my grandson was stronger than resentment and the desire for revenge. But tomorrow, when Olivia comes to me, she'll have to get down on her knees and beg for help. I won't gloat. I won't retaliate. But I will let her know that never again will she dare call me homeless. Never again will she dare close the door in front of me when I come to see my grandson. Because now I have the power on my side. And while I won't abuse it, I won't give it up either. Saturday morning was overcast. Low gray clouds hung over Pomona, threatening to rain at any moment. I stood at the window, watching the wind play with the fallen leaves, spinning them in the air and tossing them onto the wet pavement. The weather matched my mood perfectly, anxious, tense, with flashes of determination. Reed had called last night, letting me know that he and Olivia were coming over to my place at 11 o'clock this morning. When asked if Olivia knew the purpose of the visit, he answered evasively, "She's aware that we need your help." That wasn't particularly reassuring. Knowing my sister-in-law's pride, I doubted she'd be willing to accept my terms, but they had no choice. After yesterday's police interrogation, Olivia had been suspended from her job. Without Reed's paycheck and with the prospect of criminal prosecution for Olivia, their financial situation was disastrous. The bank had already sent a notice to start eviction proceedings. They had nowhere to go, nothing to live on. I felt no gloating at their plight, only fatigue and a slight bitterness at the way things had turned out. We used to be a happy family, me, Howard, little Reed. Then Olivia came along and everything changed. Slowly, gradually, but steadily. She drove a wedge between me and my son, drove us apart. And now that wedge had become a chasm over which we had to build a bridge, for Noah's sake, if not our own. At 11:30, I made tea and pulled the blueberry pie I'd baked the night before out of the refrigerator. Not that I wanted to create a cozy atmosphere for conversation, but certain rituals of hospitality had become a habit over the years, even if the guest is a woman who called you a homeless parasite. At precisely 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went to open it. Reed and Olivia stood on the doorstep. My son looked haggard and aged, as if he'd lived a few years in the last few days. Olivia was pale, with black eyes, but she held herself with her usual tense directness. Pride kept her from looking broken, even when she actually was. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They made their way into the living room. Olivia looked around with ill-concealed disdain. She'd always thought of my house as old-fashioned, grandmotherly. Her opinion mattered even less now than it had before, though. "Sit down," I pointed to the couch. "Tea? Thank you, Mom." Reed lowered himself onto the couch, nodding gratefully. Olivia sat down next to him, holding herself upright as if she'd swallowed a stick. "No thanks." Her voice was dry and strained. I poured tea for me and Reed, then sat down in the chair across from them. There was an awkward pause. Reed was tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. Olivia was staring past me, and I was watching them, taking my time with the conversation. So, I finally said, Reed said you needed my help. Olivia pressed her lips together but didn't say anything. Reed gave her a quick glance, then turned to me. Yes, Mom. Like I said, we're in a very difficult situation. The bank is threatening to evict us. I don't have a job, and Olivia's in trouble with the police. It's not my fault, Olivia interjected sharply. I was set up. I nodded, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. What exactly can I do to help? Reed swallowed nervously. Mom, we'd like you to help us with the loan payments, at least for a while, until I can find a new job. Olivia glared at him, clearly unhappy with the way he'd phrased the request. What about our arrangement? I asked, looking at Reed. Did you tell Olivia about my terms? He hesitated, glancing quickly at his wife. We discussed them. Discussed them? I raised an eyebrow. And what was the result of that discussion? Olivia straightened sharply, glaring at me. Your terms are unacceptable, she said. You're taking advantage of our misfortune to dictate your own rules. I sipped my tea calmly, not averting my gaze. Interesting, I said. When you took out a loan against my house without my knowledge, wasn't that taking advantage of my misfortune? When you kept me out of my grandson's birthday party and called me a homeless parasite, wasn't that dictating the rules? Olivia turned white, but didn't back down. That's all in the past. We're talking about the present. We're talking about Noah being homeless. Exactly, I nodded. And that's why we're here, to work it out, on my terms. Reed put his hand on his wife's knee, as if warning her against a harsh answer. Mom, we understand your position. E. I agree to your terms. They're all fair. Olivia dropped his hand and stood up. I'm not gonna grovel, she hissed. I'm not gonna kneel and beg for alms from a woman who's always despised me. I rose too, meeting her gaze. I never despised you, Olivia. You're the one who thought I was a liability from the start, that I wasn't good enough for your perfect family, that Grandma's place in Noah's life should be minimal. You're the one who methodically pushed me out of my son and grandson's life. And now that you need my help, you accuse me of setting conditions? Reed jumped up, coming between us. Please, let's not fight. We're here to find a solution, not make the problem worse. Olivia turned away, crossing her arms over her chest. I could see her shoulders tense, her fingers twitching. Pride fought with despair, and it was unclear which would win. My terms are simple, I said, returning to my chair. I take back ownership of the house. I take over the loan payments. In return, I get the right to see Noah whenever I want, unhindered by you, and no insults, no disrespect. Olivia kept her back to me, but I could see her shoulders shake. Where are we going to live? She asked quietly. You can stay in the house, I answered, but on my terms. You'll pay a token rent when you get back on your feet. Reed exhaled with relief. That's more than generous, Mom. Thank you. Olivia turned around slowly. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. What about my legal troubles? She asked. If I'm found guilty, we'll have to pay compensation to the insurance company, maybe even tens of thousands of dollars. I looked at her carefully. There was fear in her eyes, real, genuine fear. The fear of a woman who could lose everything, her freedom, her family, her future. I talked to my lawyer, I said. Charles thinks that if you make full restitution to the insurance company before the trial, they might withdraw the claim, especially if you plead guilty and cooperate. Plead guilty? Olivia almost shrieked. But I'm innocent. I've been framed. Olivia, Reed said softly, the evidence against you is too strong. The files on your computer, the account opened in your middle name. I didn't open that account, she exclaimed. Someone used my data. I shook my head. Olivia, You can keep insisting that you're innocent, but if it goes to trial, you'll lose. And then you'll face not only damages, but jail time. Those words seemed to hit the mark. Olivia staggered and sank to the couch as if her legs refused to hold her up. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, and for the first time there was no pride or defiance in her voice, only fear and despair. "Plead guilty," I said firmly. "Make amends. Make a deal with the prosecution. It's the only way to stay out of jail." "And the money?" Reed asked. "Where are we going to get the money for compensation?" I took a deep breath. What I was about to say was a difficult decision, but I didn't see any other way out. "I have some savings," I said. "Not much, but enough to cover most of the damage. It's money that Howard and I have been saving all our lives. For a rainy day, as they say." Reed stared at me in amazement. "Mom, you can't. It's your last money." "I can," I said firmly, "but on my terms." Olivia looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What terms?" "You will never stop me from talking to Noah again. You will never again allow yourself to insult me, and you'll recognize that I have every right to be a part of my family's life." Olivia stared at me for a long moment. It was a range of emotions: distrust, fear, anger, shame, and finally humility. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." "I need assurances," I said. "Not just words, but actions." "What kind of assurances?" Reed asked. "A legal agreement to return the house to my ownership, and a notarized written confession from Olivia to the insurance company. If she tried to recant later, that confession would be used against her." Olivia flinched but nodded. "I'll do it. I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I said. "It's just that sometimes all choices are bad." Reed stood up and walked over to me. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you. After everything we've done." I shook my head. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Noah, so he won't be without a mother or a home." Olivia suddenly slid off the couch and onto her knees. Her shoulders shook with sobs. "Yeah, I was such a fool," she said through her tears. "Such an arrogant, cruel fool. I thought I knew better, that I was doing the right thing. And in the end, I ended up almost destroying our family." I looked at her, broken, sobbing, on her knees. There was no gloating, no satisfaction at her humiliation, only weariness and a slight sadness. "Stand up, Olivia," I said quietly. "I don't want to see you on your knees. I want to see you strong, able to admit your mistakes and fix them." She lifted her crying face to me. "Are you really going to help me, after everything I've done?" "Yes," I answered simply, "because you're the mother of my grandson, and because, no matter what, we're family." Reed helped his wife up and put his arm around her. They stood in the middle of my living room, two broken figures clutching at each other like the last straw. In that moment, I saw them not as self-assured adults, but as frightened children who had made a mistake and didn't know how to fix it. "Charles will prepare all the necessary documents," I said, breaking the silence. "We'll sign them tomorrow, and then he'll meet with the insurance company and the police to discuss the possibility of a pretrial settlement." "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "Yeah, I don't deserve your kindness." "It's not about what you deserve," I replied. "It's about what's right." They left an hour later, emotionally drained, but with a glimmer of hope in their eyes. I stood on the porch, watching them walk to the car. Reed had his arm around Olivia's shoulders, supporting her. There was so much tenderness and care in that gesture that for a moment I saw them as the couple that had stood at the altar years ago. Young, in love, full of hope and plans for the future. What went wrong? When did Olivia's ambition and Reed's weakness of character lead them down a path of lies and betrayal? Maybe I bear some of the blame, too? Maybe I was holding on too tightly to my only son, not letting him completely detach himself from his mother's wing? Back at the house, I called Charles and told him about our arrangement. He promised to have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. Are you sure you want to use your savings to help them? He asked doubtfully. It's the money you and Howard have been saving for your old age. Yeah, I'm sure, I answered. If Olivia went to prison, it would ruin Noah's life, and I can't let that happen. You're too kind to them, Charles sighed. After everything they've done. Not kind, I countered. Practical. I want my grandson to have a normal childhood, with a mother and father by his side. And if that requires spending my savings, so be it. After I talked to Charles, I called Patricia and told her about Reed and Olivia's visit. She was really on her knees in front of you? Patricia wondered. Proud, arrogant Olivia? Yes, I confirmed. And it was strange, not what I'd imagined. Did you feel satisfaction? Triumph? I wondered. No, more like fatigue and sadness, that it had come to this, that it had taken such a catastrophe for her to finally recognize my right to be part of the family. And you decided to help them anyway? Yes, for Noah's sake, if not their own. Patricia was silent for a moment, then said, You're a strong woman, Edith. Stronger than I thought, and better than they deserve. Perhaps, I agreed. But this is not a time for accounts and resentment. This is a time for decisions and action. The next day we met in Charles's office, me, Reed, Olivia, and the notary. We signed all the necessary documents. The agreement to return the house to my ownership, Olivia's admission of guilt to the insurance company, the agreement about my right to see Noah. Olivia was quiet and depressed, but she no longer resisted. She signed every piece of paper without objection, only occasionally giving me odd glances, a mixture of gratitude and shame. Charles assured me that he would contact the insurance company immediately and offer them a pretrial settlement. I'll do my best to get them to withdraw the police report, he said, but I can't make any guarantees. In the end, the decision is theirs. I understand, I nodded. Thanks for your help, Charles. As we left the office, Olivia suddenly took my hand. Edith, she said quietly, I know that no words will make up for what I've done, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry about the way I treated you, about what I said to Noah, about everything. I looked into her eyes, looking for signs of falsity or pretense, but all I saw was genuine remorse. I know, Olivia, I said, and I hope that we can start fresh now, for Noah's sake, if not our own. She nodded, then hugged me awkwardly for the first time in all the years we'd known each other. It was awkward, tense, but sincere. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Reed drove me home. On the way, we talked about Noah, about his success in school, about his fascination with medicine, the usual grandmother-father conversation, without the tension and innuendo that had marred our interactions over the past few years. He asked about you, Reed said, every day. When are we going to visit Grandma? I miss him, I admitted. He misses you, too. Maybe, maybe we could bring him to see you tomorrow? I smiled, feeling my heart warm. I'd be very happy to. In the evening, Charles called. I've got good news, Edith. I've spoken to the insurance company. If Olivia makes full restitution and apologizes in writing, they're prepared to withdraw the police report. That's wonderful, I breathed out. So there wouldn't be a trial? Probably not. But she'll lose her job, it's inevitable. And it'll be hard for her to find a new one in the insurance industry, where everyone knows everyone. It's better than prison, I said. Absolutely, Charles agreed. Now for the financial side. The damage is estimated at $35,000. That's a substantial amount of money. I swallowed. It was almost everything Howard and I had accumulated over the years. I'll wire the money tomorrow, I said. Edith, are you sure? It's the last of your savings. I'm sure, I said firmly. I have a roof over my head and a pension, and Noah will have his mother by his side. That's more important than money. After I talked to Charles, I sat in Howard's chair for a long time, thinking about the vicissitudes of fate. A month ago, I'd been an old woman, relegated to the margins of family life, deprived of seeing my grandson, insulted by my own daughter-in-law. Today, I was back in charge of my home, allowed to see Noah whenever I wanted, and my daughter-in-law was on her knees before me, begging for help. This is not how I envisioned my victory. This is not how I wanted justice to be served. But life rarely follows our plans. I pulled out an old photo album and found a picture taken years ago. Me, Howard, and little Reed at a picnic by the lake. We were smiling at the camera, happy and carefree, unaware of the twists and turns that lay ahead. What would you say, Howard? I mentally asked, looking at his smiling face. Did I do the right thing? I could almost hear his answer. You acted like a mother, Edith, like a person for whom family is more important than pride and resentment, and I'm proud of you. There was a lot of uncertainty ahead. Would Reed and Olivia be able to climb out of the financial hole? Would Reed find a new job? How would Olivia handle the loss of her career? And most importantly, would they really honor our agreements, or would they revert to their previous behavior once the crisis passed? But today, I didn't want to think about that. Today, I rejoiced in a simple thought. Tomorrow, I would see my grandson, without obstacles, without having to ask permission. And perhaps this is the beginning of a new chapter in our family's history, a chapter in which I will no longer be a stranger. 3 months flew by. Autumn gave way to winter, and Pomona was covered in a thin layer of snow, a rarity in these parts. I looked out the window at the white street and smiled, remembering Noah's delight when he first saw snowflakes falling from the sky. Grandma, Grandma, look, the sky is falling apart, he shouted, bouncing with excitement. A lot had changed in those 3 months. The house was mine again, legally and factually. Charles had helped me with the paperwork, and now no one had any doubts about my ownership. The bank agreed to restructure the loan, and I took over the monthly payments, significantly reducing my expenses for everything else. The savings were gone. All the money had gone to compensate the insurance company, but Olivia had avoided a trial and possible jail time. Reed found a new job, less prestigious and worse paying than the previous one, but it was better than nothing. He became a driver for the local school bus, which provided a steady, albeit modest, income. Olivia, on the other hand, was still unemployed. After the scandal with the insurance company, her reputation in Pomona was badly damaged, and no one wanted to hire her for a job involving finance or paperwork. The most drastic change for me was dealing with Noah. Now I could see him practically any time I wanted, picking him up from school, spending weekends with him, inviting him to sleepovers. He was blossoming back into the inquisitive, open boy he'd been before Olivia had systematically restricted our communication. Today was a special day. Reed and Olivia were coming over for dinner. Ever since we'd made our agreement, they'd been visiting me regularly, usually on weekends. These visits always had a strange atmosphere, a mixture of formal politeness and underlying tension. I checked on the chicken and potatoes baking in the oven, Noah's favorite, and started chopping vegetables for the salad. At 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Grandma! Noah rushed to my neck as soon as I opened the door. I brought you a drawing. What a wonderful surprise! I smiled, hugging him back. Behind him stood Reed and Olivia. My son's smile was warm and genuine. Olivia's was strained and formal, as always. Hi, Mom. Reed hugged me when Noah let go. Are you cooking something delicious? It smells wonderful. Chicken with potatoes and rosemary, I replied. Come in, don't just stand on the threshold. Olivia stepped over the threshold, holding a small basket. I brought apple pie, she said. I made it myself. That's very sweet of you, Olivia. Thank you. She nodded and went into the living room. Over the past few months, our relationship had taken the form of polite neutrality. Olivia had honored the terms of our agreement, never interfering with my communication with Noah, showing outward respect, never using barbs or insults. But I could see that behind that mask was a deep-seated resentment, even hatred. I couldn't blame her for feeling that way. Olivia had lost everything she thought was important: status, career, financial independence. She'd been forced to accept my help, to kneel before me, to plead guilty to a crime she kept insisting in private conversations with Reed she hadn't committed. For a woman of her character, it was an unbearable humiliation. Noah tugged on my arm. Grandma, look what I drew. He handed me a piece of paper with a bright, naive child's drawing. It showed a family, a tall man, a woman with long hair, a little boy, and an elderly woman with gray hair. All the figures were holding hands. That's Dad, Mom, me, and you, Noah explained. We're all together. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Despite all the struggles, the tension, and the underlying animosity between Olivia and me, we were still family to Noah. He didn't see or didn't want to see the gulf that separated us. It's beautiful, honey, I said, hugging him. I'll hang it on the refrigerator so I can see it every day. Olivia watched the scene with an unreadable expression on her face. Then she turned to Reed. I'll help in the kitchen. You stay with Noah. Reed nodded and led his son into the living room, where there was a TV with his favorite cartoons. Olivia followed me into the kitchen. What can I do for you? She asked, rolling up the sleeves of her blouse. You can chop the tomatoes for the salad, I said, pointing to the cutting board, and the cucumbers. We worked in silence, side by side. It felt strange to be so close to a woman who I knew despised me, but had to show respect. How's the job hunt going? I asked, breaking the silence. Olivia tensed, but answered politely. No change. No one wants to hire someone with a stain on their record. Maybe you should try a neighboring town, where they don't know you? Maybe, she shrugged. But that would mean traveling back and forth every day. Gas money, and we have every penny on the line right now. I nodded understandingly. The family's financial situation was still precarious. Reed's salary was barely enough for the bare necessities, and the rent they paid me symbolically was more of a formality than real income. I've been thinking about starting my own small business, Olivia said suddenly. Something that doesn't require a lot of startup capital. What kind of business? Interior design, maybe. She gave me a quick glance. I've always had a taste for that sort of thing. And in this field, my past wouldn't matter so much. I struggled to hold back a smile. Olivia had always thought my house was hopelessly outdated and my taste old-fashioned. Her comments about the awful wallpaper and ancient furniture had been frequent sources of conflict in the past. It's a good idea, I said neutrally. You've always had a certain vision in this area. Olivia gave me a sharp look, trying to determine if there was any hidden mockery in my words. But I kept my expression steady. Yes, she said finally. I did, and I still do. Noah burst into the kitchen at that moment. Mom, Grandma, come quick. They're showing real heart surgery on TV. Olivia cringed. Noah, it's not for kids. Turn it to cartoons. But Mom, it's so exciting. I want to be a doctor and do surgeries too. Why don't we all watch it together? I suggested it. It's an educational program, and Noah is really interested in medicine. Olivia opened her mouth to object, but then she remembered our agreement: no conflict in front of the baby, respect for my opinion. Okay, she said through gritted teeth. But not for long. Dinner's coming up. We went into the living room, where Reed was already watching the program with obvious interest. On the screen, surgeons were performing open heart surgery, commenting on every step. Noah climbed into my lap, his eyes burning with admiration. Look, Grandma, they're gonna fix the heart, and the man will live on. Yes, dear, I smiled, hugging him. Medicine is an amazing science. Olivia sat tensely, clearly unhappy with the choice of program. I knew she would have preferred her son to watch something more kid-appropriate, but she remained silent, maintaining her outward calm. After dinner, Reed and Noah went off to play in the yard, leaving Olivia and me alone at the table. I was pouring tea when she suddenly spoke. I know what you think of me, Edith. I looked up at her. What do you think I think? That I'm ungrateful, that I hold grudges, that I'm a bad mother and wife, she said quietly, but with an inner tension. And you know what? You're right. I really am ungrateful. I do hold a grudge, but not because you helped us. It's because you made me feel like a jerk. I put the cup on the table. I never wanted you to feel worthless, Olivia. All I wanted was to be a part of my son and grandson's life. You wanted control, she objected. You wanted things your way, and now you've gotten your way. I shook my head. No, Olivia, I wanted justice. I wanted to be respected as a mother and a grandmother. I didn't want to be insulted or kicked out of the house when I came to wish my grandson a happy birthday. She lowered her gaze, a blush of shame coloring her cheeks slightly. I know I did a terrible thing that day, and I do regret it. But that doesn't change the fact that you have us all on a tight leash now. I'm not keeping anyone on a leash, I said calmly. I'm just restoring balance. I have a voice in the family that you use to systematically silence. Olivia was about to say something, but the door opened and Noah burst into the kitchen, laughing, followed by Reed, his face flushed red from the cold. Grandma, me and Daddy built a snow fort. Let's go show you. The conversation broke off. The moment of candor had passed. Olivia was back to being the polite daughter-in-law, me, the caring mother-in-law. But something was different. For the first time, she openly acknowledged her feelings without hiding behind a false facade of gratitude. And in a strange way, I felt relieved. Better honest dislike than hypocritical niceness. The evening continued in a more relaxed atmosphere. We showed Noah old photo albums, told stories from the past, how Reed had first caught a fish, how he'd fallen off his bike and broken his arm, how he'd performed in the school play. Olivia participated in the conversation, even smiling at times, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. When it was time to say goodbye, Noah hugged me tightly. Grandma, can I stay with you tonight? Please. I looked at Reed and Olivia. This was the moment of truth, a test of how sincere they were in agreeing to my terms. If it's okay with your parents, of course it's okay, I said. Reed smiled. Why not? It's not like you have school tomorrow. Olivia hesitated, something like jealousy flickering across her face, but she nodded. Okay, just don't stay out too late. Noah jumped for joy. Yay! Grandma, are we going to bake cookies? And will you tell me stories about when Daddy was little? Sure, honey. I hugged him. Anything you want. Reed and Olivia left, leaving Noah with me. As I watched them walk to the car, I noticed that Reed tried to take Olivia's hand, but she yanked it away, keeping her distance. Their relationship was clearly going through a rough patch. When Noah fell asleep in my guest bedroom, which I'd specially prepared for his visits, I stepped out onto the porch for some fresh winter air. The snow continued to fall, covering the world around me in a white blanket of clarity. I thought about the strange turn my life had taken. 3 months ago, I was rejected, humiliated, denied the right to see my grandson. Today, I am now the full owner of my home, a grandmother who can see her grandson whenever she wants. I held the financial well being of my son and his family in my hands. I had a control I didn't have before. But did it bring happiness? True, deep happiness? Yes and no. I rejoiced in the opportunity to be a part of Noah's life, to see him grow, to learn, to discover the world. I was grateful for my restored dignity, for no one else daring to call me a homeless parasite. But I also saw that our family was no happier or more harmonious. Reed was torn between his devotion to his mother and his love for his wife. Olivia hid her resentment and hatred under a mask of politeness, but those feelings were eating away at her from the inside out, poisoning her relationship with her husband and affecting her attitude toward life in general. Noah, for all his childlike directness, could not help but feel the tension between the adults, although he did not yet understand its nature. There was no real reconciliation, only a redistribution of power, only a change of roles. Now I was the one who dictated terms, and Olivia was the one who had to accept them. Justice had been served, but at what price? I went back into the house and went into Noah's room. He was asleep with his palm under his cheek, his breathing even and calm. I leaned over and kissed him lightly on the forehead. "Good night, my darling," I whispered. And in that moment, I realized that everything had not been for nothing. To be near this little man, to see his smile, to hear his laughter, to answer his endless questions. It was worth going through all the difficulties and conflicts for that. I didn't know what lay ahead. Will Reed and Olivia be able to overcome their relationship crisis? Would Olivia ever truly accept me as part of the family? Would we all be able to work together to create the loving and supportive atmosphere that Noah deserved? But I knew one thing. I would no longer remain silent when I was being treated unfairly. I would no longer let anyone push me out of my family's life. And if that meant I had to get tougher, learn to set conditions and demand respect, so be it. In the end, I won that battle. Not in the way I had envisioned, and not with the feelings I had hoped for. But I had won. And now I had to learn to live with that victory without turning it into another war. Because the real victory is not in humiliating the enemy, but in restoring justice and finding inner peace. And although inner peace was still a long way off, I felt that I was moving in the right direction. I went back to my bedroom, lay down in bed, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be a day I would spend with Noah, baking cookies, telling stories, enjoying every moment of this precious time together. And the adult problems, well, they can wait. After all, we have time to deal with them now, time that I hardly had before, and that's probably the biggest victory of all.